The house was too perfect, like it had been waiting for us, its windows glinting with a promise that felt just a little too eager. We should have known something was wrong when the realtor hesitated before handing over the keys. My wife, Sarah, and I had been house hunting for months, slogging through overpriced fixer-uppers and soulless new builds in the suburbs of Portland. We were exhausted, desperate for a place to call our own after years of renting. When we found the listing for 1427 Maple Drive, it seemed like a miracle. A sprawling Victorian, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, perched on a quiet hill overlooking a fog-draped valley. The price was absurdly low for its size, barely within our budget, but just manageable. The photos showed polished hardwood floors, intricate crown molding, and a wraparound porch that begged for lazy Sunday mornings. The catch? It had been on the market for nearly a year. Probably just bad staging, Sarah said, scrolling through the listing on her phone. I nodded, but something about the photos nagged at me. The rooms felt staged, yes, but too staged, like a set for a play no one was meant to see. We toured the house on a chilly October afternoon. The air was thick with the scent of damp leaves and wood smoke. The realtor, a wiry man named Greg, met us at the front door, his smile tight and his handshake clammy. He led us through the house, pointing out the original 19th century fixtures, the stained glass window in the dining room, the spacious attic perfect for storage. Sarah was smitten, practically glowing as she ran her fingers along the banister of the grand staircase. I wanted to love it too, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was watching us. The air inside was heavy, like stepping into a room where an argument had just ended. Every creak of the floorboard seemed to echo a little too long. Greg was cagey when I asked why the house had sat empty for so long. "Oh, you know, old houses like this intimidate some buyers," he said, adjusting his tie. "Too much character." His laugh was forced, and he quickly changed the subject, ushering us toward the kitchen. Sarah didn't notice, but I saw the way his eyes darted to the corners of the rooms like he was checking for something, or someone. We moved in 2 weeks later. The first few days were a blur of unpacking boxes, arguing over where to put the couch, and collapsing into bed exhausted. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, but we chalked it up to the thick walls and the fact that we were miles from any neighbors. At night, though, I started noticing things. A faint tapping, like fingernails on glass, coming from somewhere deep in the house. I'd lie awake, straining to pinpoint it, but it always stopped just as I thought I'd found the source. Sarah said it was probably the pipes settling or the wind rattling the old windows. I wanted to believe her, but the sound felt deliberate, like something testing the edges of our awareness. It was during the second week that I found the door. I was in the basement, sorting through a pile of boxes the previous owners had left behind, mostly junk, old lamps, and stacks of yellowed magazines. The basement was unfinished, all rough concrete and exposed beams, with a single bare bulb casting long, jagged shadows. I was shoving a box aside when I noticed a seam in the wall, a faint outline that didn't match the rest of the concrete. I ran my fingers along it, feeling a slight groove, and my heart gave a little lurch when I realized it was a door, painted to blend perfectly with the wall. No handle, no visible hinges, just a rectangular outline and a small rusted keyhole. I called Sarah down to see it. She frowned, brushing her hair behind her ear. "That's weird. Greg didn't mention anything about a storage room." We searched for a key among the boxes, but found nothing. I tried prying it open with a crowbar, but the door didn't budge. It was solid, heavier than it looked, like it was made of something denser than wood. Sarah suggested we call a locksmith, but something about the door made me uneasy, like it wasn't meant to be opened. That night, the tapping was louder, more insistent, and I could have sworn it was coming from behind that hidden door. Over the next few days, the house started to feel different. The air grew colder, even with the heater on full blast. Shadows seemed to linger in corners, even when the sun was high. Sarah noticed it too, though she tried to laugh it off. "This place is just old," she'd say, but her eyes lingered on the walls, like she was waiting for them to move. I couldn't stop thinking about the door. I'd find myself standing in the basement, staring at it, my fingers tracing the seam. Once I pressed my ear to it and thought I heard a faint hum, like a distant machine, or a voice too soft to make out. I started researching the house's history. The county records were sparse, but I found an old newspaper article from the 1970s about a family who'd lived here. The article was vague, mentioning a tragic incident that left the house vacant for years. No details, no names, just a grainy photo of the house with its windows dark and empty. I showed it to Sarah, but she brushed it off. Old houses have stories. Doesn't mean they're true. But I noticed she stopped going to the basement alone. The turning point came a month after we moved in. I was home alone. Sarah was at work, and I decided to tackle the door again. I'd bought a set of lock-picking tools online, more out of curiosity than confidence. The basement was colder than usual, the air so thick it felt like it was pressing against my skin. I knelt in front of the door, my flashlight casting a narrow beam on the keyhole. My hands were shaking, not just from the cold. The lock was stubborn, but after 20 minutes of fumbling, I heard a click. The door shifted slightly and a gust of stale air hit me, carrying a faint, sour smell, like old sweat and something metallic. I pushed the door open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The steps were wooden, warped and uneven, disappearing into a void the flashlight couldn't penetrate. I called out, my voice swallowed by the silence. No echo, no answer, just a heavy, oppressive quiet. I should have walked away, but something pulled me forward, like the house itself was daring me to go deeper. The staircase led to a small room, no bigger than a closet. The walls were bare concrete, stained with dark, irregular patches that glistened faintly in the flashlight's beam. In the center was a single object, a wooden chair, old and splintered, with thick leather straps dangling from the arms and legs. The straps were worn but intact, stained with something I didn't want to identify. The air down there was wrong, thick, almost oily, like it was clinging to my skin. I felt a sudden pressure in my chest, like the room was squeezing the air out of me. Then I heard it, a faint rhythmic tapping coming from behind the far wall. It was slow, deliberate, like someone knocking to be let out. My flashlight flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw movement in the corner. A shadow that didn't match my own. I spun around, but there was nothing. Just the chair and the straps swaying slightly, as if something had brushed past them. I stumbled back up the stairs, slamming the door shut behind me. My heart was pounding, my hands slick with sweat. I locked the door and dragged a heavy box in front of it, as if that would keep whatever was down there contained. When Sarah got home, I told her everything. She didn't want to believe me, but the fear in my eyes must have convinced her. We called Greg the next day, demanding answers. He claimed he didn't know about any hidden room, but his voice cracked when he said it, and he hung up abruptly when I pressed him. That night, we both heard the tapping. It wasn't coming from the basement anymore. It was everywhere, echoing through the walls, the ceiling, the floor. It was louder now, more urgent, like something was trying to get our attention. Sarah clung to me in bed, her nails digging into my arm. "What is this place?" she whispered. I didn't have an answer. The next morning, we found scratches on the basement door, long, jagged marks, like someone had clawed at it from the inside. Sarah wanted to leave, to stay with her sister until we could figure things out, but I couldn't let it go. I needed to know what was in that room, what the house was hiding. Against Sarah's protests, I went back down, armed with a crowbar and every light I could find. The door was already ajar when I got there. I hadn't touched it since the day before, and the box was still in place, undisturbed. My stomach twisted as I pushed it open, the hinges groaning like a low moan. The staircase was the same, but the air felt heavier, like stepping into a pool of cold water. I descended slowly, each step creaking under my weight. When I reached the room, the chair was gone. In its place was a small, rusted metal box, sitting in the center of the floor like it had been placed there for me to find. I didn't want to touch it, but my hands moved almost on their own. The lid was stuck, but it gave way with a grinding screech. Inside was a bundle of papers, letters, yellowed and brittle, written in a shaky, uneven hand. They were dated from the 1960s, addressed to no one, just page after page of rambling confessions. The writer, a man named Arthur, described hearing voices in the house, whispers that told him to do things. He wrote about the room, how he'd built it himself to keep them quiet. The last letter was barely legible, scrawled in what looked like blood. They're still here. They never leave. As I read, the tapping started again, louder, closer, coming from the walls all around me. The flashlight died, plunging the room into darkness. I fumbled for my phone, but it wouldn't turn on. The air grew colder, so cold it burned my skin, and I felt something brush against the back of my neck, soft, like fingers, but impossibly light. I swung the crowbar blindly, hitting nothing but air, and ran for the stairs. The tapping followed me, growing into a pounding that shook the walls. I tripped on the steps, crawling the rest of the way, my breath ragged and my heart slamming against my ribs. I burst into the basement and slammed the door shut, but the pounding didn't stop. It was in the house now, in every room, every corner. Sarah was waiting upstairs, her face pale and her eyes wide. "We're leaving," she said, grabbing her keys. I didn't argue. We threw what we could into the car and drove to her sister's place, not looking back. We never returned to 1427 Maple Drive. The house is still on the market, its listing updated with new photos that show nothing of the basement or the hidden room. We tried to warn the next buyers, but no one listened. Sometimes, late at night, I wake up to the sound of tapping, faint and distant, like it's calling me back. Sarah says it's just a dream, but I know better. Whatever was in that house isn't done with us, and I'm terrified that one day it'll find us again.